Okay, final speaker today is Jon Dron from Athabasca University, and he's presenting a design brief on challenges and opportunities for learning analytics.
1, 2. That's not working. That's working. Is that working? Yes. Sounds good to me. Yeah, well, that's kind of what I'm supposed to be doing. The first author of this paper, Nazim, left us shortly after writing it, taking the software with him. So we have some of it, and we're still using some of it, and it has some value. But really, I'm going to be talking about the problem that we're trying to solve, and hopefully, maybe I'll get in the 2 minutes of questions that I'll wind up with some ideas from you about how we can actually address some of those problems. Excuse me. So just to let you know that Vancouver isn't always like this. This is the view from my house, which is quite good. Sorry. So first of all, technologies. I'm using a definition from W. Brian Arthur that I like very much. I have found some flaws in it, but it's nonetheless the best that I've found so far. The orchestration of phenomena to some use. So it is the way in which we put things to some use. And these can be mental things, these can be religious things. They don't have to be toys like these. Among these, I use a definition of hard and soft technologies. I mean, in hard technologies, the orchestration of the phenomena is embedded within the technology itself. And this is easy to see in something like this, in the iPhone or whatever else, because we can see that we integrate a large number of components and pieces with these things. But it applies equally to things which are traditionally seen, at least in management literature, as being soft technologies, such as legal systems and processes that we might use within organizations. So the orchestration is stuff that we don't have to think about. It's been done for us already. Whereas soft technologies, the orchestration is done by people. So, for example, a paintbrush on its own ain't going to do very much. But if I can actually make use of that in the way in which I put it to some use, then I am contributing a part of the technology. In effect, it's a cyborg. The technology itself has no purpose, no meaning, doesn't do anything without me doing something with it. And soft technologies are quite interesting. But we get benefits from both. With hard technologies, we gain things like efficiency, freedom from error, speed of execution, and some things are just simply impossible. It's very hard to go to the moon on a bicycle. I mean, there are some things that hard technologies make possible. Whereas the soft technologies give us flexibility. Creativity, the ability to adapt and change things quickly. And I see pedagogies, amongst many other things, as being technologies. These are the orchestration of phenomena, the ways we think people learn, the ways we think people understand things, are put to some use, combined with other things in order to help people to learn. And what we're seeking in any given situation is not a hard technology or a soft technology. I'm not saying either are better or worse than the others, but something that is ideal for the circumstance that we find ourselves in. Baby bear's bed. Not too hard, not too soft, just right. And just to emphasize, I'm talking about machines, not I'm not talking about machines, I'm talking about processes. Legal systems are hard. You can't break the rules, and as many people have found to their cost. Whereas email, which is a mechanized thing, can be used for a million things, from scheduling to teaching to whatever. We are part of that technology. And just to put it simply, soft technologies can be used skillfully, whereas hard technologies can be used correctly. Humans may well be part of hard technologies, and when they are, they have to do what the technology tells them to do. If you adjust the valve wrong on a steam engine, it will blow up in your face. Whereas if you use a paintbrush or a guitar or a pedagogy a little bit differently from the way in which it was planned, it doesn't necessarily. It's our input that makes it so. The person on the left there, incidentally, is knitting. That's a very soft technology. Knitting needles can knit anything. Another important thing, all technologies are assemblages. There is no such thing as a unit of technology. All technologies exist in relationship to other technologies and are made of other technologies. It's how they evolve. It's how they adapt. We change technologies by adding to them, typically. Nearly always, actually. So very similar to sort of Kuhnian paradigms. You know, we don't get paradigm shifts in technologies. We get, let's put together a bit of Gorilla Glass and some interesting electronics and some software and get an iPhone kind of an idea. So we're kind of developing a system called Athabasca Landing, which is a social space. It has a social network. It isn't a social network. It's basically a social construction kit. It's a way of filling the gaps. Athabasca University is a distance university. It doesn't have face-to-face students. And so we build systems to support them, usually electronic systems, but also postal systems and a whole range of other systems. And of course, when we do that, we harden things. And when we harden things, we leave spaces between. Because hard technologies don't give you that creativity, that flexibility. And so a lot of things tend to wind up being done at Athabasca University by email or by massively over-processizing. What a word. Over-processizing the thing. I'm going to step down because I hate standing up on stages when I could be talking to you. It's much nicer like this, isn't it? I think so. So Athabasca University has got the landing. The landing is intentionally designed to be an extremely soft system. It's a system that can be used to do anything, more or less. Not necessarily very well, but some of it does quite well. Some of it is constructed of hard pieces, little bits and pieces. And those hard pieces, as we assemble more hard pieces, things become softer. It's a fascinating thing. You know, if for instance, you have a learning management system that only allows submissions on a particular day of a particular size, and you have a student who needs something different, well, what we normally do is say, oh, well, mail it to me, or something like that. So we're adding a technology to make it softer. We're adding two hard technologies together to make a softer one. And that's how the landing is built. Lots and lots of uses. It's designed for everybody within the university, not just students, not just for people particularly learning, but people researching, people doing administration, people doing anything that people do within a learning community. So it's not a purpose-built learning system, but we hope that learning will happen. And it's designed to cater for what Terry, sitting in the corner over there, and I have talked about as three distinct social forms that social media enable. Groups, the traditional ones, and Barry Wellman was talking about these and how the traditional kind of closed group is changing. Networks, which of course many of us have been talking about, and it's fascinating to see that everything can be turned into a network and examined as one. But we think there's also a very important thing, sets. So I'm assuming you all know about groups. These are the traditional classes and stuff, about networks, because that's what most of us are talking about. But sets, we think, are kind of important because these are the things where we don't actually, it's not to do with personal connection as such. It's to do with the things that we're interested in more than anything. And it's interesting to see the growth of interest communities or interest sites like Pinterest, like Twitter. Most of Twitter is not a network. Twitter is about hashtags, which are sets of things. You're interested in the same stuff. You don't know who the people are half the time. You can form a network out of it. But really, it's not about networks. It's about sets. A lot of the stuff that we're doing in terms of analytics is about sets. We're using relational databases, for God's sake. I mean, this is the archetype of set theory. You know, is the database that we're using to look at things. So it's not all about groups. It's not all about networks. It's also about sets. And people use the landing within these social forms in many, many different ways. There are many different ways in which they're used to learn. We don't have formal course spaces, but we do have formal courses using the landing. This is complicated because it all gets mixed up. Because people create groups, you can do that. You can do everything you can do in social systems on the landing pretty much. So you can create groups, or you can create tags. People use those quite often on courses. They say, use the course tag and post whatever you like, wherever you like. Or we can use networks. People follow their students, for example, or ask their students to follow them. We have a following metaphor, not a friending metaphor, but it works much the same way. So there are many, many different variants of these social forms found on our system, which leads us with a problem, because we really kind of like to know what's going on. We don't. You know, but we've got 3,321 users today, I just checked. Some of these are working in courses, some of these are administrators, cleaners, you know, they could be anybody. People on courses may be on multiple courses, and they may be doing things informally, they may be doing research on their own. What we don't have is this unified view. There's lots of things we could do, and we're hearing about a lot of those things at the conference. So what we need is an analytic system that can cope with both this formal stuff that's going on and a lot of informal, ad hoc social networks that are happening, as well as interest-based sets that are occurring. And that's why we've created what we named in the paper Lassie. We haven't actually used that word. We call it AU Analytics, which is boring, whereas Lassie sounds good, doesn't it? Go fetch me some information, Lassie. Learning analytics for social systems or software, I can't remember which, in education. And basically, it's free-form analytics. There's nothing particularly smart about the version that we have on our site. We have two versions of the thing, in fact. We have the one that I'm familiar with, and the one that Nazim would talk about if he were here, but he's not, which is a standalone version. The standalone version could be very interesting. I wish I could tell you more about it. Because the standalone version lets us do some pretty smart things. It lets us identify the people within groups and look at the activities, what they're posting, what they're looking at, what they're commenting on. And it lets us look at the networks, the relationships that they have with other people, and to see, again, for clusters, what they're looking at, using simple degrees of separation, nothing special. And it lets us look at tags. It lets us look at the sets of things that people are looking at. And how am I doing for time?
All right, 1 minute.
Good, 1 minute is plenty. So we have a real big problem, is asking the right questions. What we've got is this enormously soft system, deliberately a soft system. And we don't have, but we also have overlaid on top of that hard systems, courses, which have, where tutors are telling people, you must post this to this blog, you must contribute to this discussion forum, you must do this reflective learning diary. And therefore, identifying the different kinds of learning that's going on is fiendishly hard. And that's why we need this very, very flexible kind of system. We found a few things, but I've got about 10 seconds. 2 minutes. I've got 2 minutes. So Nazim has found a few things by using his tool. He's found some obvious stuff, like the fact that people tend to use a subset of tools. They tend to, once they're using a blog, they tend to continue using a blog. And students who come into a formal, hard course have a tendency to carry on using whatever tools they were using within that course. So you've got a kind of preferential attachment effect, a Matthew principle. I spelt principle wrong. That's what happens when you're using a soft technology, you see. I thought that I would do this using a soft technology to see what happened. I just write it. And it needs skill, and I don't have the skill to spell principle. We've found that there tend to be a bunch of different preferences that cluster around groups. And again, this relates to the same kind of thing, that people get introduced to this within a formal context. This isn't a free-form system. This is a system where some people are being introduced to the notion through a formal environment, through a hard system. And that means that they tend to share. People who've been in the same groups tend to share the same interests, the same ongoing interests after the group has ended. It's let us play around a little bit with what happens when you take people out of a social network. You can't actually take people out of the landing without killing everything in sight at the moment. We are trying to deal with that. We've actually, I think, only deleted about 3 users since we started. We disable users, but if we delete them, it deletes all their content. And that can become enormously complicated. I know I experimented with taking me out of the system, and I have created help within the system and all sorts of things that just disappeared. So this lets us play around with what happens with removing hubs. And we have found, or rather Nazim has found, he tells me he has found, I haven't seen these results, but he tells me he has seen that when you take people out of hubs, out of a social network, that they do turn out to be, or our social network at least, turns out to be scale-free, which means you can take most nodes out very easily, but if you take something which is very highly connected out, it basically destroys the entire network. And that's true. And I shall now stop. We want to do many other things, but that's it. Thank you.
All right, we also have time for questions.
Oh, go on.
You have intimidated them.
Thank you, Simon.
So, is there any role for theory in designing social learning analytics?
Is there, what kinds of theory are you talking about? Because yes, I mean, obviously there are things to do with social network analysis theories.
So could you just give us an example of how a theory or a framework or some notion that distinguishes you from just someone, say, doing social network analysis in an organization?
That, I think,
how might that have shaped your thinking in a formal or perhaps more ad hoc, informal, improvisational way, given the way that you do your work?
It's an excellent question. And
that's I mean, it's a serious question, right?
Yeah, and it's precisely
the kind of learning analytics conference. So we're trying to figure out what the role of theory and all this stuff on educational research has to say for technology design.
That makes the second question. So I'll try and answer both. Because, I mean, this is kind of the point behind it. What we're aiming for is a soft analytics system, which means to say that we don't know what questions we want to ask in the first place. And we don't know what kind of answers we're seeking in the second place. This means that it's not about looking at and analyzing networks. It's not looking particularly at qualitative analysis and storytelling, although that all plays a role. The point is that we bring whatever theories we have to the table, and then we have a means of at least exploring, not testing them, but exploring them. So we can have a look at, for example, the different kinds of pedagogies that we might use within different groups, the different kinds of technical construction, socio-technical construction, I guess, that we might be using when, for instance, I mean, in my courses, I tend to say, well, students, you do what you like, basically. Just remember to tag it. And what I'm doing there is applying approaches based on my beliefs, which I want to test about ownership and self-direction. Others will be doing using a different set of things. The point is that what we're aiming for really is something that's so soft that it's open to any theory. Does that make sense? There was a further question about how we should design technology for learning, and I think that we need to look at it as an assemblage, as a set of things that we can bring together, which include process things, include pedagogical things, include models that we have. And we need to see these things as strongly interrelated, interconnected systems. And the way to build them is from small pieces.
So this word assemblage has come up a couple of times. There's a whole community trying to think about assemblage and emergent design.
Yeah.
Yep. And
Can
you give us a name or a reference to if there are people here interested in this notion of assemblage, which I think is quite appealing when you don't quite know what you're doing, but you want to do it more than just at random.
I think so, and this draws inspiration from a variety of different communities, actually, partly from technology design and looking at people like Kevin Kelly and Brian Arthur, partly from complexity theory and related aspects, and there I would say, who are we looking at? Stuart Kaufman would be my starting point for that one. Partly from actor network theory, where of course we've got people like Latour and Law who are looking at all of these people are looking at the same kinds of problems from a quite different perspective. Quite a lot of systems theories are also pretty relevant within this kind of context. I think we might be among the few who are kind of bringing this together as a principle of learning technology design.
Thanks. Okay, we'd have time for one more question, maybe.
Go ahead.
So, John, loved your presentation and great talk. Of course, soft technologies are great, but for some people they can be very frustrating, right? They allow a lot of creativity. They support those who can tinker, right? Yeah. And they can basically get a lot of freedom, but it can be equally frustrating for those who don't like that on both ends, educators and students. So how do we design? And you touched on the critical point, I think, here, it's complexity. How do we manage that system design complexity so that we basically address all the types of learners and educators?
I think the trick is making soft things out of hard things. I think the core to all of this is assembly. What we need, no one way of doing things is going to suit anybody, nor for that matter the same person in a slightly different context. So we need flexibility. But the price for flexibility is that soft is hard. Hard is easy. So to build systems that are sufficiently hard or sufficiently soft, we should be building them out of hard bits. I think that's the key thing. We shouldn't require a huge amount of thought. Very important to note, of course, that a technology that's hard for one person, or the thing that we call a technology that is hard for one person, may not be for the next. But I think this is a misunderstanding of what technologies are. Take a learning management system, for example, is very soft to somebody who's building it. Quite soft to a teacher, but very, very hard to a student. So we have to understand the different contexts that we're looking at when we're building these things. But the key and central thing, I think, is make the pieces fairly large, so they're hard and therefore easy. Put the pieces together to make them as soft or as hard as we think is necessary at any given time. And that, of course, is a big and separate question.
Okay, thanks a lot for this nice and inspiring talk for the end of the session, and I think we have lunch now.
Thank you.